name is Ellie, and I'm with the Arizona Faith Network. Usually I have music really lonely without any music playing, so go ahead and get your dance on. Everybody just stretch it out, flex it out, breathe, take in some deep breaths. We have some amazing storytellers with us this evening. Hello from Prescott. Again, if you're just joining us and you feel comfortable, please add your name into the chat, where you're zooming in from, your preferred pronouns, and/or even your faith practice. Hello, Hannah. Hi, Linda, Sandy, Leah. Sarah, hello. Welcome, welcome. So good to have everybody joining us. Joe, hello, Joe. Longtime advocate. Hi, Nancy from Sun City. Thank you for zooming in with us. Oh, all right, Methodist and UCC. I hear you. Chloe T, you are the bomb.com. Thank you so much for joining us. It's so good to see you virtually. David here. We got Dr. Marin here, Arizona's historian. And I hope I'm not going to mispronounce that, but I'm going to try. Temeria? Is that correct? Hello, it's good to see you. Vivian, what's up, Viv? All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started. It's good to have everybody here. I like to see all the shifting pictures. I feel like it's Hollywood Squares. Anyway, welcome. My name is Ellie, and I am currently zooming in from the occupied lands of Akima Oldham, Hohokam, and Atam lands. I'm one of the team members, and I'm honored to be joined here by Khalil and Marie. A very quick introduction of who we are. Arizona Faith Network is an interfaith organization dedicated to bringing people together to promote peace and understanding through interfaith education and dialogue, as well as healing of the world through collaborative social action. We are made up of people of different faiths who covenant with each other in solidarity and mutual respect. And we recognize that our differences and our diversity make us stronger, because when we find common ground, we can lift up our differences as unique individuals and communities and begin to heal. Together, we are committed to both civil dialogue and transformational action, while we seek to keep our faiths and beliefs as an inspiration and direction for all that we do. Our motto is to be together, talk together, and act together. And the commonality of this statement is really the together part. We have been hosting Smart Justice Cafes across the state of Arizona and in partnership with many faith-based and community-based organizations for the past 3 years. And this year we have a mini theme driving our outreach in criminal justice reform, homelessness and food sovereignty, and environmental justice. And that is hope, healing, humanity. And we believe we can do this together through the exploration of stories and the deep dives into those difficult questions that push us to think differently, all in the pursuit of a transformative healing. Before we get started, a few things to ask you to keep in mind as we delve deeper into the stories of our esteemed guests this evening. Please do keep yourself on mute. And any questions you have, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll have an opportunity to ask them towards the end of our program. And again, if you haven't done so already, please share in the chat your name and pronouns where you're zooming in from, and you're affiliated with a congregation, please add that too. And I want to take this opportunity as Arizona Faith Network to send light, love, and power to all of the groups across the state of Arizona that are mobilizing for Black lives, advocating for policy change, and for those who are even feeding our hungry. Thank you to each of those groups, and please go and support them and us too, if you can. Now I'll turn it over to Khalil to introduce our next two key team members and share a little bit more about their work.
Thank you, Ellie, and thank everybody for joining us tonight. My name is Khalil Rashdan. I am an AFN board member and also the Social Justice Program Manager. And I also want to introduce one of the other team members tonight on the call, Marie Lee. She's on there somewhere. And then, you know, we come together tonight to think about a village concept. And in that village, where we say it takes a village to raise a child, it takes that same village to assist those, especially when they need help coming out of incarceration. But sometimes we tend to forget those who are inside. And tonight's conversation, especially during this very important month, Women's History Month, is to think about those women who are also confined that are part of our history. And also the notion that we don't discard life. How can we help to uplift, heal, and bring people together? So with that being said, I want to turn it over to Katie for a few words real quick, and then we will go into our theological framing.
Good evening, everyone. It's so good to see so many faces on here that are gathering tonight in unity for justice and for people, and to find ways to fix the fragmentation and brokenness in our prison system here in Arizona. I am Reverend Katie Sexton Wood, and I am the Executive Director of Arizona Faith Network and ordained in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ tradition. I am extremely proud of our team here at AFN, which is growing rapidly and is just filled with talented people who are really working on these issues. And so with that, I turn the mic over to Khalil.
Thank you, Katie. And we have the opportunity to hear from Kim Kreka, our theological framing.
Thanks, Khalil. So what I'd like to do is frame this around some scripture as far as the needs and serving those within prison and those who've been released. And the first is Psalm 25, where it says, "Show me your ways, O Lord, teach me your paths, guide me in your truth and teach me, for you are God, my Savior, and my hope is in you all day long. Remember not the sins of my youth and my rebellious ways. According to your love, remember me, for you are good, O Lord." And Psalm 72 says, "He will deliver the needy who cry out, the afflicted who have no one to help. He will take pity on the weak and the needy and save the needy from death. He will rescue them from oppression and violence, for precious is their blood in his sight." And I think that Jesus brings this all together in Matthew 25 in the parable of the sheep and the goats, where he says, "For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of these, you did for me." So these passages from the Bible provide strong support for involvement in the lives of those that society has identified as the least of these. And it seems that most religious faiths believe that those who are in prison must be treated fairly and humanely, and that the best approach to curtail criminal behavior is reformation and restoration, not retribution. But sadly, our criminal justice system in the United States is largely punitive and focused on those who are poor, uneducated, predominantly non-white, and most recently, women. And in the past couple of decades, we've seen the incarceration of women increase at twice the rate of men, with over half of their sentences carried out in local jails rather than prison facilities. These women are hard hit by the higher cost of remaining in touch with their loved ones while they struggle over the loss of their children. They lack appropriate medical care, especially pregnant women, and they lack programming options. So what can we, as members of various faith communities, do to help our sisters that are in prison? Well, thanks be to God, there are a lot of options. Now, I spent almost 7 years serving on a worship team that visited the Perrywill Women's Prison in Goodyear, Arizona. And by the time I moved to Tucson in 2018, we were holding weekly meetings on 5 of the 7 yards within that facility. And we met with about 50 inmates on a regular basis on each of those yards. So it seems small, but taken as a whole, it was as large as one of our larger churches here in Arizona. And we offered these ladies opportunities to question passages of scripture that they found confusing or upsetting. We provided opportunity for communal prayer as well as personal prayer. We sang songs of joy and songs that brought tears to our eyes. And we shared communion bread with them as we gathered in one big circle and held hands. And one of our team members, Grandpa Jack, as the ladies called him, offered hand hugs because we weren't allowed to touch the ladies except on the hands. And he would clasp their hands between his 2 huge hands and squeeze gently. We wished we could hug them so many times as they shared stories of loss of their children or death of a family member or worries, about their loved ones. But when we did what we could, then often that was just crying alongside them. Now, because programming is so sporadic and in very high demand, many of these ladies couldn't even apply for classes that would help them succeed once they were released at least until 12 months from the gate. That's their release date. And the demand always exceeded availability. So our group began offering a spiritually based mentoring program in conjunction with the worship services that we offered. And these mentoring programs addressed behavior, boundaries, personal discipline, along with practical information like how do you get your ID card and enroll in Access and more. So we offered this mentoring to ladies who were about 15 months from the gate, but we didn't restrict it. So even those who were serving life sentences took the mentoring course and went on to become co-leaders of these courses with us, which was great because it gave them a chance to do something to help others. So it was really a wonderful way to work with them. But the Department of Corrections has really failed to adjust their procedures and protocols to take into account that women respond differently to stimuli than men do. And providing the same programs to women that men receive has left the women unprepared to deal with situations that landed many of them in prison in the first place, because sadly, most of these situations involve relationships with men. Over a quarter of the women in prison and jail report being sexually abused as a child and an adult. Over a quarter are serving sentences related to drug charges, where their male counterpart may have received a significantly lower sentence. Knowing these statistics helped us serve the women. And we pointed out the importance of women in the Bible and the significant roles they played in order to help build self-esteem. We encouraged them to explore roles of leadership, and it was just amazing to watch them grow in self-confidence and transform into strong leaders who knew how to practice self-control. The capacity for giving back was channeled into productive avenues, and they blossomed. We had ladies that led crochet circles, and they made hats for infants in the neonatal units for local hospitals, and also hats for the homeless that our churches distributed. We gathered donations of yarn and crochet needles from churches all over the state. We had other ladies that regularly gathered food items for food pantries in our communities. They made some kind of arrangements to have permission to give us those items once a month to donate to the local food pantries. Others donated artwork to help raise money for church programs, and the churches in turn supplied art supplies for the ladies. They formed welcome committees to assist new arrivals to understand the unwritten rules and provide them with hygiene items like shampoo, deodorant, and help them obtain clean clothing to replace the state-issued soiled and tattered items they were given. Those with higher education degrees led GED mentoring programs and taught English as a second language. And others became involved in advocating for change within the prisons. And it's largely because of their work that we were able to get HB 2222 passed in 2018, which provided more feminine hygiene products to the female inmates. And we're hoping to expand that legislation with HB 2261, the Dignity for Incarcerated Women Act, this year. The remarkable thing about this whole experience for me is that it's been an exercise in reverse ministry. I found I couldn't outgive God, and I sure couldn't outgive these ladies. The more I became involved, the more blessings I received. These women have ministered to me so many times, and I wanted to just share with you an excerpt from a letter that I received on February 5th from one of these extraordinary women who happens to be serving a life sentence. Her name is Virginia, and she writes, "Good morning, Kim. I was thinking about what you said and getting rid of extra burdens and listening to what God leads you to do. I've been real busy too, and wonder if it hinders my ability to love more fully. When I was in the medical detention unit for a few weeks, it was like a retreat. I was alone in a room, walls surrounding me, no people to interact with, no TV, books, crafts, or other stimuli. It was me, my thoughts, and God for the first few days. It was like going through a refining process. I thought obsessively at first, experienced an array of emotions. I cried, I was relieved. I felt confusion, had questions, pondered on the meaning of life, on my existence. All the while, God was speaking to me, and I grew in understanding. My mind finally calmed. I felt peace, joy, love, and blessed. I was happy and free and ready to love the whole world. I was grateful for this special time where there were no demands on my time and energy, and it helped me to be in the world, but not of it. I encourage you to take a break and rejuvenate. Your spirit is nudging you for a reason, and it doesn't require a particular place, just a space within you, a gap of silence where the mind is quiet, the heart open and receptive, so you can hear his still, small voice." This was just one example of hundreds of similar letters that I've received. My life has been enriched beyond measure by these hidden treasures of God. And since I'm no longer serving on the worship team because I've now moved to Tucson, Arizona, I communicate with the women through mail and recently through e-messaging on their tablets. I'm also devoted to advocating for prison reform and changes to our criminal justice system. And I provide regular information about what's really going on inside the prison walls to organizations like Arizona Faith Network and many others. But there's much work to be done both inside and outside those prison walls. I believe that the faith community is called to help fill the gaps between what is provided by the state and what is actually needed by these women, by these least of these, in order to successfully transition into returning citizens and acknowledge that they are beloved children of God. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Appreciate you being here. The next session, and one of the things Kim mentioned inside, we're looking at HB 2261, which the bill was put together around women's dignity. There are several issues, as you will hear tonight from our panelists, that are going on inside of our women's prison. And as it stands today, this bill has not received a hearing or scheduled for a hearing over on the Senate after it has unanimously passed the House, bipartisan support. So with that being said, I want to introduce our next speaker, Alyssa. She's been a very dear ally here for Arizona, and the work that her organization and she has done has touched many organizations here on the ground and many lives. So I want to open it up and introduce Alyssa with the forward report on our women's prison here.
Thanks so much, Khalil. And thank you to the Arizona Faith Network just for having me on tonight. And just really thanks to you all for coming out to listen to this important issue. You know, so often when we talk about incarceration, we don't talk about and center women enough. Because relative to the number of incarcerated men, the population is smaller, but no less important. And there's so many things, especially happening in states like Arizona, that should concern us about what's happening to women who are impacted by the criminal justice system. As Khalil mentioned, I work for an organization called Forward.us. Arizona is one of our priority states for criminal justice. Sadly, that is not because Arizona is doing a good job at criminal justice. Arizona currently has the 5th highest imprisonment rate in the country. And while, you know, you might hear things from your leaders about how the prison population is down, right, yes, it is. It is down because of COVID-19, but Arizona hasn't done anything to change policies that would make those temporary decline in population permanent. And so I just, as you all are listening to lawmakers and to leaders talk about criminal justice reform, I just urge you to push them that anything has gotten better, anything has changed, because until some of those policies change and until we take measures to reduce the prison population, we won't have any long-lasting change. And so I just want to talk to you a little bit about what's happening in Arizona when it comes to women who are incarcerated. So Arizona, as I mentioned, has 5th highest imprisonment rate for everyone. But when we talk about women, Arizona imprisons women at nearly double the rate as the rest of the country. And that's not because Arizona has a higher population. That's not because women in Arizona are committing more crimes. It's not because women in Arizona are more dangerous. That's not it at all. What's happening in Arizona is that women are serving disproportionately long sentences, primarily for drug and property crimes. So think about women in Arizona spend 50% longer in prison than the national average for drug crimes, and 80% for property crimes. And so but before I go further, I just want to circle back, because something else that compounds the problems in Arizona in this incarceration crisis is that Arizona is one of the few states in the country that makes people serve 85% of their time for nearly all offenses. And so when we talk about it, it may not be that on paper it looks like Arizona is giving longer sentence necessarily, but people are serving longer sentences because of these harsh, draconian truth in sentencing laws that impact how long people have to remain in prison. And there are such few opportunities for people to be released and to get home. One of the policies you may hear a lot about over the past years and this year's is earned release credits. And the reason this is so important is because until Arizona expands earned release credits, increases earned release credits, people will continue to have to serve 85% of their time. And it's so problematic. We know the research shows us longer sentences don't make our communities safer. They don't help people re-enter their communities. They don't support them so that communities thrive. And so it's just so important as we think about the criminal justice system and we think about women in the criminal justice system, especially. I was doing some work for this tonight and trying to look at some more recent numbers and looking at information that talks about women in prison, and this is nationally, report that over 80% have experienced some form of sexual assault. Majority of women incarcerated are more likely to have a substance abuse disorder and to possibly have used a substance within a month or during the time in which the offense occurred. And so we think that we can't incarcerate our way out of trauma, out of public health crisis, out of addiction. And so the responses that we need for women and for everyone have to be responsive to the problems. And we can't keep locking people up and essentially throwing away the key, which is so often what happens in Arizona. In Arizona in the last 20 years, was 2000 to about 2017 or so, the prison population of women increased like 3.5 times for drug and property crimes. So these are, again, we are talking about, and what's important to remember, and I know this group really knows this, is that most of these people are coming home. Most of these women are coming home. They are mothers, they are sisters, they are daughters, and they have loved ones and communities that do embrace them and that are trying to stay connected to them. And when we think about the cost of incarceration, we have to include children. What we know about adverse childhood experiences, what we know about the strain, and what we know about the high rate of women who are incarcerated, who are mothers, who are caretakers, who are often single parents, and so what their incarceration means to the care of their children and loved ones. And so the numbers are important, but the numbers are important because I feel like it really shows that Arizona is an outlier, but that these numbers are people. These numbers are the women in Arizona that have been impacted, that the system has overlooked. And it is up to wonderful folks like all of us on this call, both to reach out to policymakers and lawmakers and other elected leaders to try to really push for change. And so I echo what Khalil said. There's several legislative bills that are moving, the Dignity for Incarcerated Women Act, the Earned Release Credit Act. I mentioned there's a bill about prison oversight as well this year. I'm sure that many of you all have seen the numerous articles about the lack of healthcare in Arizona prisons, and all of these issues, they compound, right? There are so many crises that are just worsened behind bars, as we've seen this public health crisis through COVID-19 over the last year and what it has meant for the men and women who are incarcerated. And so it just, when I wrap up, I will drop the link to the report that Forward did a couple of years ago on women who are incarcerated in Arizona that has some more statistics and more facts. And please reach out to me if I can be helpful. But it's so important to think about how we support people to come home, how we make sure that we get people home, and how we change policy so that people are not serving such long sentences to begin with. If we're really about public safety, if we're really about our communities, then this public safety strategy that Arizona has been using, it doesn't work. It is just that simple. And there's 30 states across the country have seen that they've been able to reduce their prison population and reduce their crime rate simultaneously. So please, I urge you and push back on many folks that will say you can't do both at the same time, and you can. And one more thing before I turn this back over to Khalil. I know that oftentimes in reform work, we talk about victims, and we talk about what victims want and what will make folks whole, and we talk about harm. And those are important conversations to have. And I urge you and remind you that people who are incarcerated, especially women and victims, are not mutually exclusive groups. They are often overlapped. They are often And so we can't talk about victims without including those who have been harmed, who are incarcerated. And so it's so important as we think about how we help people to heal from trauma, to address addiction, and to address to address the violence that they've endured, that we really do wrap our arms around everybody, including those women and men who are incarcerated. So thank you all so much for letting me join tonight, and I will turn it back over to Khalil.
Thank you, Alyssa. You're much appreciated. And we encourage people to read the report that was put out by Forward, and, just to grab a better understanding of what's going on in that report and how it's playing out today. And then also, today we received information from AFSC, American Friends and Service Committee down in Tucson, who are also working on criminal justice issues. They're encouraging people to tweet Warren Peterson using the hashtag Hear the Bills and ask him to give these criminal justice bills a hearing. So I'm going to also drop that.
Khalil, you want to unmute?
Okay, sorry. I'm also drop that in the chat for people to tweet at the request of AFSC and several other organizations. So with that being said, essence of time, I want to move on to our panel discussion and introduce the speakers who will basically go into a little story of self. So first up, we have Alexandria Hunt.
Sorry about that, technical difficulties. Hi, everybody. First, I just want to start by saying thank you so much for inviting me and sharing this space with me. I've been excited all week to speak. I think this is a great opportunity, so thank you for allowing me here with you tonight. So my name is Alexandria Hunt, and I served 5 years collectively in the Department of Corrections. It was kind of a long road. As a child, Ellie had mentioned being whole in the chat, and that kind of resonated with me because for me, that was a really large issue. I dealt with abuse in the home and depression. So for me as a child and a teenager, I never felt whole. I always felt like there was something missing. So as I got older, it led me to seek out feelings and things that you shouldn't. But I was young, I was lost, I was broken. So that's what I did. And I ended up getting into drugs at a pretty young age. And that just quickly spiraled into, where I was in a position where I felt that I needed to, make money and commit crime to support my habit. So I did. I ended up getting arrested young. I went to prison for the first time when I was 19 years old. And I had been raised and brought up to believe that the system was just and that it worked the way that it should, so when I was sitting in jail, I remember thinking that maybe this will save me, thinking I deserve to be punished, and these people will have the resources and programming to help me because I'm still young and, I still have a chance. I still had some hope left in me despite everything that I'd been through. And when I got there, when I transported to prison, I immediately realized that I was very naive and that I was completely wrong in thinking that. For me, it was kind of an immediate culture shock. They made me shave my head right off the bat because my hair was red. And that was when I realized, oh, this is not going to be what I thought it was. I received, there was really no programming that was effective at that point. So it just became a vicious cycle of me getting out of prison, getting arrested, going to jail, going back to prison, and it really was just a vicious cycle. And when I would go back to prison, I would think maybe this time they'll have something to help me, but they never did. So when I was released in 2015, I got clean on my own. I did a lot of trauma therapy. And they ended up bringing up another case on me, an old case. So at this point, I had a child. I had been clean for years. Life was going great. And when I went to my court hearing, they essentially said, you might as well start looking into adoption because you are going back to prison. And I remember crying and telling her, does all the hard work that I've done mean nothing to you? And she said, at the end of the day, statistically, you will reoffend. So no, it doesn't mean anything to me. And it was in that moment that I realized that I was going to have to do my sentence. And upon getting out, all of those experiences that I had with lack of programming and the lack of medical care that I had and all those kind of things that had compounded and built up over the years, that it was my duty to get out and show the world what really goes on in there, because there, you know, as Alyssa had said, there's a lot of trauma and addiction, and those things do not just resolve themselves. It takes time and effort and help from others to really fix that. You know, so I was released in September of 2020. So I'm a fairly new release. And that's kind of how I got involved in this work, was really just trying to jump on board with driving policy change in Arizona. We are behind, and women are sadly left way, way, way behind. You know, so my focus this year has really been on 2261, the women's dignity, and driving earned release credits, you know, so that women have an opportunity to work on themselves and get back home to their children. You know, I missed out on 2 years of my son's life, so it's so important to me that other women don't have to go through that. So that's kind of what led me here today. And I'll go ahead and pass it back to Khalil.
Thank you, Alex. And our next panelist, Veronica Torres.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. Really appreciate it. My name is Veronica Torres. I was incarcerated when I was 14 years old, and I served 25 years. I've been out 2 years. The first years of my incarceration were very challenging. I mean, you can imagine being a teenager going in. It was a struggle. I got into a lot of trouble. I come from the hood, and yeah, we had a different way of communicating at that time. But thankfully, by the time of my release, I was and am prepared to start at the U of A, at the School of Social and Behavioral Sciences as a junior. I received my paralegal certification in there. I worked with an amazing team of incarcerated women in conjunction with HBW, and we all created numerous self-studied peer-led classes. We created peer mentoring also for women entering the OC to help them begin thinking about their goals for freedom. We created programs for everything in between. So your basic how to survive in life, to reading policy, understanding your legal work, writing a resume. We did a lot of those things, and we also were working with Kim in there, and Ali. We were working with a lot of people in there to make a lot of things happen. So it's pretty cool to be in this setting today with everybody and what we were doing in there. So I could co-sign everything they're saying. I was there, and then also what we did in there also was how to develop leaders. We helped to allow people to express themselves artistically. And then, you know, with communication skills, say what you have to say, but let's say it eloquently. Also, one of our biggest focuses were helping to people understand the different forms of release, the options that they had, which make sense, which don't. There came a point where we realized that the avenues of release in Arizona are broken. They're not working. And so, you know, that's a lot of what my work is focused on today. Currently, I work with Puente on criminal justice matters. I'm working with the Pascuayaki tribe to develop a cultural focused reentry program. that will help to not only help the Native Americans, the Yaqui Native Americans on the inside spiritually, but also to help them replenish all of their sweat lodges, make sure that they have medicine in there. Also working with the U of A so that we're doing research right now, initial stages, just kind of getting some perspective of what a prison to university pipeline would look like. What does it look like to pursue a secondary education once you get out? It is possible. And so yeah, the ultimate goal for me is to rescind everything from truth in sentencing. As mentioned by Alyssa. Yeah, there are very huge issues with the truth in sentencing. Won't get into that here, but yeah, thank you so much again for having me here, and stay blessed.
Okay, thank you, Alex and Veronica. I'm going to turn it over to Ellie.
Hello, and thank you. It's good to be back with you all. And I want to thank our speakers. I would like to thank Kim, Alyssa, Alec, and Vero for sharing your stories. And I believe that that is one of the first steps that we can do to actually become whole, is to hear our stories. And so I'm going to open up the conversation to Vero and Alec to think a little bit more about the environment of prison. What I mean by that, with prisons, jails, and immigration detention centers usually placed in very remote and or rural communities, as just one of the many examples, many may not be familiar with even where these prisons are, or even the actual environment inside the prison. Can you each speak briefly toward your experiences regarding your access to healthy food, healthcare, and of course, feminine hygiene products?
Yeah, absolutely. So those are, some pretty hot topics. And I would have to say that all of those areas are lacking. The access to health or to healthy foods is essentially non-existent. And I don't think people really realize the implications that has. When I went into prison the last time, I went in, I was super healthy. And then I essentially lived off of gas station food, chips, rice, honey buns, that was really what I had access to. So I came out with high blood pressure, cholesterol issues, and none of those issues were issues that medical would address. They said that I was too close to the gate with a year left, that they would not address the issues. So when I got out, I had to seek out medical attention out here because of that lack of medical care in there. And it was just really crazy to me to think that, I was someone who was going in at 26 years old and healthy. What is that going to do to somebody's body who already has high blood pressure issues or cholesterol issues? There's no fresh vegetables, there's no fresh fruits. Those are just things that simply are not allowed. So the food and the medical definitely, I think in a lot of ways go hand in hand. It's just lacking all around. As far as feminine hygiene goes, in past years, there have been some policies put into place that addressed some of the issues that were happening in the past, where you could not get, feminine hygiene products. But the problem is when policies are implemented, DOC doesn't always listen, or they become extremely lax over time, or it can really differ depending on what officer happens to be there that day. So there are times where women have to go and, ask a man for feminine hygiene products, who then want to crack a joke about it or deny them access because, well, they've already came and got some earlier in the day. So I think it's kind of riddled with a lot of issues that are just deep issues across the entire women's prison here in Arizona. And they're not things that have to be an issue. A lot of them are fairly simple fixes. Everyone should have access to fresh foods. Any female should have access to a feminine hygiene product without feeling ashamed or degraded upon asking for them. So I just really think it's riddled with issues. I could probably go on for hours, but that's kind of at the core of the issues that, you know, I've seen.
Yeah, so something that I think is important to note also when we think about the healthcare is that anybody who has a long-term sentence, they don't get the same type of medical care. You will, if you're known to be a lifer, in fact, if you're known to be a lifer, you're not going to get the type of medical care that someone who's going to be getting out will. Same can be said for dental. I had dental issues for a long time, but because of my sentence, I could not get like real help for like a pain that I was having in the back of my tooth. The overall state of like the food, the healthcare, the clothing, the hygiene products. Again, I have to always say that it all goes down to budget. It all goes down to money. It all goes down to where are they putting this money. And the treatment of us also goes down to the training and the stigma that is being put on us as people in orange. And that carries not only out from the public, like everybody is like, there is this, oh, well, you know, they're in orange, they don't deserve to be treated like human. And that is the consensus and the treatment that we have on the inside. And because it is a culture and it is supported all the way to the top, it's been a long time coming that we're even able to have these conversations. And so, you know, again, healthcare, we pretty much are going back and forth with two different healthcare providers that is outsourced. I remember once upon a time, our medical was not outsourced. The government, it was in-house. You know, DOC was responsible for how that went. Now that they're outsourcing, they're able to now put the liability on someone else. And then say we trained vendors. So that's the macro. And I just want to give people like the macro vision of like the business side of why a lot of this is happening. And that's across the board with everything I think that's happening in our world. Anyhow. And then also going into the food aspect of things. Currently at this point, the women are everyone locked up is getting 2 meals on the weekend. They're pretty much going 10 hours without food. They're supposed to be getting a brunch, but the brunch is just like your regular breakfast meal that you're going to receive. There are a majority of the women in there, or majority of, well, I don't want to speak for the men because I don't know, but the majority of the women do not have the same type of support from their families, from the streets, from people. Like society has pretty much looked at the women incarcerated as the last relevant human being that should be looked at. When it came to reentry programs, the women were not initially chosen for that. It was always the men. Going back to the food, yeah, okay, 10 hours a day, again, no fruit. The food, whatever foods that they do give us, like the pizza, the cheese never melts. The bread is very crusty. I say this fully knowing and conscious that, again, this is what happens to me in my mind is that people say that we deserve to be treated that way. And what's happening on the inside to the women in there, they're also believing that they deserve to be treated that way. And there are a lot of women out in there who have been abused themselves severely. And so, again, as Ms. Deacon said, as Ali said, this issue is huge, it's bigger. You know, this is a societal issue. This is a huge issue, but going back, I don't know if I'm supposed to go into access of programming now, but I'm going to go ahead and just go there.
Well, wait, real quick, Beto. I want to take an opportunity. Both you and Alex shared so much just now. And so before we go on to that next question about programming and education, I want us to take a moment to just feel what was said. Reflect on those stories. Allow yourself to feel all of the things that come with the treatment of another human being, with our mothers, our sisters, our daughters, our aunts, our loved ones. And as you sit with these stories, as you hear the continuing responses to these questions, if you too have any questions or any thoughts that you want to put into chat, we encourage you to do so now. And as we continue, I just want to let Vel and Alex know that we're sending you light and love and dignity. And we're going to come back. I already know that this is a question that has been put into chat. We'll have a conversation about COVID, but I do want to move to this next conversation because I think COVID, not only can we talk about COVID and its relationship to what has the Department of Corrections done or not done around COVID-19, but I think we can talk about that in regards to thinking about that in regards to lack of programming. You know, we have on our legislature this idea of earned release credits. Well, if earned release credits are available only if you participate in programs, and now we have a year without programs, what does that mean for the future? And so continue to put your questions in the chat. We're taking note and we'll come back to those. Our next question, Vero, we'll start with you. Can you share with us your experience and knowledge regarding the history of programs offered to the women inside? Like what types of programs were offered, who benefited from them? And have you felt, both of you, that they prepared you for returning to public life? And in that programming, we can include religion as well. So what are the opportunities to practice your religious expressions also while incarcerated?
Now you want to bring religion in it. Because there's a thing in there, you know, where not everyone can practice their religion in the way that they want to. They don't have access to you know, the vendors for the herbs. You have your Wiccans, you have your Native Americans. There are certain things that they're allowed to have access to. They're not. They're allowed spaces to be able to practice. That's not being allowed. When I was there, and so yeah, so access to programming. So there's little to no access. Let me think. How do I say this? So when we're talking about access to programming, there's a chosen or selected few of people who can get access to programming. And those are usually the people who are on the lower yards. So they're going to get access. And why lower yards? Because they have a little bit of time and they're about to get released. Makes sense. You want to prepare them. People on the lower yards. The problem is that there are people on max and medium yards who are there because of special circumstances that have nothing to do with the choice that they made. Some people are there with disciplinary problems. They can't stay out of trouble, so they end up on a higher unit yard. Those people, everyone at some point will be released. And so I have to think about how I'm going to say this. So who gets access? Lifers do not get access to pretty much no programming, but yet they will be going to a form of a hearing at some point in time, and they have to show some form of growth, some form of something, because that's part of the criteria. So we're going to have a set of people who are going to be, and I was one of those people, by the way, who was not allowed to take certain programs and all these different things. And so I had to appear before the parole board and explain what I did for myself that DOC did not provide for me. And so that's for the lifers. Now let's talk about people who have immigration holds, detainers. They can't participate in a single solitary program. They cannot participate in a single education program, and any job that they get, they are at the bottom of the pole, and they're only getting 10 to 30 cents for their positions. And so very few, for the small programs that are there, very few people get to benefit from them. Being out here, I see that there are a lot of resources, a lot of people who have a lot to offer all the yards in prison. And so we have to change that. How I ended up getting into any type of programs for myself is, you know, I went and I would ask, and if they told me no, whatever, the worst has already happened, but I would ask and say, look, and I'll tell them my story. This is what happened. I want to learn something. I'm curious. Like, I've been sitting in here all day. Like, there's nothing to do. There's, you know, and when, and people could only make options based on the options that they have. People could only see the world based on the perspective that they've grown from or they see. And so I'm sitting here trying to, like, something inside of me was like, I want to learn. I want to go home, but I want to know why this even happened. What is the meaning? And I couldn't get any of that. I couldn't get anything, no counseling, no guidance, no programming, no nothing. Thankfully, I could talk my way into some classes, and this is the result of that. But that's not for everybody. That's not going to be, it's not going to be that way for everybody else. You know, my peers in there believed in me and believed in what I was saying and what we were doing and the information that I would provide them, that they then shared their lives with me. They then shared their experiences and their knowledge with me. And then when we get into that asked question, I'm going to answer it honestly about what not having program can do to someone. I'm done. Okay.
Veto made some killer points, and she's absolutely right. So, you know, the 5 years that I served was over a 10-year span. And it's incredible to see just in that 10-year span, how much it's degraded. I mean, it was bad to begin with, but then for them to start pulling and pulling and pulling and pulling these programs, like, you know, you're passing things like 1310, which require programming, and trying to push through policy that requires programming, but you're pulling those programs out of the Department of Corrections. You're setting people up for failure. You're passing these bills, making it look as if there's a lot going on, but then the department can just pull those programs and people are screwed. And then another thing that Veto said that I think was really, really, really important is getting people who are 12 months or 6 months to the gate in some random quick, 6-week class does not prepare you for reentry. Reentry should start the minute you walk in those doors, because it takes a lot to get someone to the place where they're comfortable getting out. And it's really people like Veto, and there's a lot of other people that I can think of who created peer-to-peer programming in there. That was what was helpful, because the things that DOC gave me, none of it was helpful. I mean, I can say that absolutely it was unhelpful. Kim had mentioned that what they give us, a lot of it is tailored to the men. And it was interesting because I had to take a cognitive behavioral class, and the cognitive behavioral class was so tailored to men that it was just completely useless. It became where we were just cracking jokes in class because we weren't learning anything from it. And then, the teachers, the CO3s who are the counselors in prison who are teaching these classes, they don't care because they think it's a big fat joke also. So I think that, what programs do exist is just kind of to make it look like they're doing something, because they're ineffective. And looking at our recidivism rates, I think it's proven that they're ineffective. So programming should be at the core of what we're doing. Like, healing the people that are on the inside should be most important, but you have a lot of people who say, get them in there, punish them. They don't need any of that, and then send them out. Well, if you want safe communities, you have to invest in the people that are in prison, because they're going to come home and they're going to join your communities again. So it makes most sense to invest in these people. You have, it's been mentioned before, who have been abused physically, emotionally, sexually, who have mental health problems and drug abuse problems. Why not help, get to the core of the issue rather than these punitive measures that have been proven to be ineffective. So it's a huge problem. And then post-COVID, it just has been a nightmare. I mean, nothing really exists at this point. You know, I know there's a few small things going on in a couple yards, but they're those DOC ran programs that are completely ineffective. And then, you know, as far as the, you know, religious practicing goes, that also has been essentially nipped in the bud. So unless you know, happen to know someone on the outside who is involved with a church or an organization, you know, who can talk through email or writing, you don't have access to that. And these are people who are extremely vulnerable. And, you know, it's a time in their lives where they're finding their faith and they're leaning on their spirituality, and they don't even have access to that. So it's really a huge issue, you know, that has all these moving pieces. It's like cogs in a machine. And, you know, it's funny because in theory, you think it's just such a simple thing that these people deserve this. They don't deserve to be thrown to the side with no help. You know, but sadly, it's not really seen that way by many.
I wanted to add one more thing, if I can. About
Go
the
ahead.
programs. Some of the programs that are offered on the inside are done by counselors who like the CO4, CO3s, and mostly probably aren't certified in those arenas, like, you know, alcohol or drug or those types of things. Also, the counselors have heavy caseloads, so they're just trying to get through that class really fast. And most of the counselors that are conducting some of these programs are also former DOC officers. And so they're trained, again, back from the view of they're trained to view the prison population as a threat first. And so often these programs are just pretty much going through the motions of curriculum. And it's not as meaningful as it could be had you had someone whose heart was in it.
Awesome. Thank you both, Vero and Alex, for that. And so before I engage in this final question from us as the hosts, and then we'll be opening it up, we have Marie, who is going to be coming on in a little bit to ask some of those questions that were put into chat. So thank you all for continuing to put those questions and your thoughts and your interactions and that good energy towards our panelists tonight. But my final question, I really want us to be intentional about practicing the skill of listening. We are in such a polarized time where just listening to Alex and Vero's story, you notice I have a different shirt on. I felt like I was, you know, up in church in here. I had to start taking off, you know, the heavy things. But all of that to say, we are in a very polarized time where it is so easy to call out, to cancel, to harm somebody with even just our words and our actions. And so I encourage us to be a little bit vulnerable in this space tonight. And with that, know that hopefully we're trying to figure out how to feel all of these things in the digital world, let alone the one day that we'll be able to come back together again. So to Alex and Vero, I want to ask, now that you are free, can you share with us what freedom feels like? What do you dream or imagine differently? And really, basically, I guess, what makes you feel whole?
So like, what does freedom feel like? Honestly, it hurts. Like, I was really excited about like the first, you know, being out. It was, you know, everything was new. I seen everything with such like, wow, you know? But like, I feel the effects of those 25 years now, psychologically, emotionally. There's some stuff like I'm experiencing things for the first time. So I have like this crash course that's happening. I constantly hear myself like I need something, because I'm not sure how to handle this, or I'm not sure how to perceive this, because there was just so much that happened in there, so much of a breakdown. And so yeah, how does it feel? I'm happy to be free, and I want, and I know that my people on the inside would say, Vero, don't you cry, girl, you're home, shut up. But it is hard. And I know that eventually they will experience it too. Like there's just something else that we all need it. And I've talked to even men, there is something. So how do I imagine the world? Like, you know, stepping out, people are still people no matter where you go. You're gonna have that character everywhere you go, you know? And so I guess imagining the world differently, like, I guess I just hope that the world at some point makes sense. That justice, whatever that is, that we heal. I don't know, that we heal, that things just make more sense. This is hard for me, obviously. You've asked me this before and I just don't, I don't know. And what makes me whole? I'd rather not say, but that's my power. Well, not my power doesn't make me whole. What I believe makes me whole.
There you go. Thank you.
This is definitely an emotional question for sure. I think that freedom, it really is a duality of you're excited, you're home. I get the opportunity to be at home with my son and doing all of these things that people on the inside, you know, dream of doing. But at the same time, I still feel like pieces of me are implanted there, you know, almost like a tree. Like my roots are stuck there, but my trunk has started to like grow in this other direction. So I still feel like there's so many pieces of me that are stuck there that, you know, it's hard to fully enjoy freedom when you know that so many people are dealing with what you just went through and how many are going to continue to go through what you've been through. You know, moms that are going without their children, or, you know, people who are in ill health and know that they won't ever step outside those gates, or, you know, there's a million different situations that could be going on. What I hope for everything to look like, I really just hope that at some point we can get to a place where we have such a cultural and societal shift that people can see and love humans for being humans, not for their lack of a criminal record or, you know, their wealth. Or I just think that people put stock in so many things that don't really matter, that we have all of these marginalized communities that completely get thrown to the wayside. And I think that it's damaging to society as a whole. And I just hope that one day we can move past that, you know, and just do better, you know, do better for future generations. That's always my thing. I want my son to live in a very different world than what I have lived in. And then as far as what makes me whole, that one's hard for me because, I mean, I mentioned it earlier, that's something I've struggled with my whole life. You know, I've always felt like there was something missing. But for me, it's just feeling comfortable in myself for the first time in my life. And I think forgiving a lot of the people who had perpetrated violence or harm against me, just forgiving all of those things has allowed me to move forward from them. You know, I got out and I dyed my hair red and said, you know what, DOC, like all those things that you did to me over the years, I'm not going to continue to let them hold me down. I'm going to use those as what's going to drive me to build a better future. You know, and just being able to sit and hold my son and know that when I get to the point in my life where I die, I'll die knowing that I did everything that I possibly could to make the world a better place for him.
Wow. If you can't hear me, I'm taking a very deep breath in and out. That's a very difficult question for all of us to ask ourselves. Perhaps waking up in the morning and looking in the mirror and taking time with ourselves to ask that question, what makes me whole today? Knowing that just because that's who you are today doesn't mean that's who you were yesterday. or even who you will be tomorrow. And I think another thing to build off of kind of what you just shared is this idea that for both you and Vero, I hope that you find rest, a good, deep, peaceful rest, and the opportunity to continue to build your community outside of prison walls in any way, and know that we here at the Arizona Faith Network and those attendees, or the folks that have come, will support you in any way possible. There is a toolkit. There is a link that we'll put back into the chat. There is a toolkit for ideas of how you and your congregation or you and your community can become engaged, and that was developed by the women inside Perrywill and has been added on since. But definitely asking ourselves what makes us whole. And we actually have a special guest. One of our panelists wasn't able to make it sooner, but she's here now. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Khalil. He's going to do his little thing, and then we'll come back to Marie to ask those final questions. So, I just really, again, really, Kat and Alexandria and Vero for joining us tonight. We're going to hear from Kat in a moment, but Vero and Alex, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ellie. And, I want to welcome Kat, who is a good friend, who, can discuss a lot of the history that, that comes out of Perrywill. This is Women's History Month. And, when you talk about what's been going on in Perrywill, Kat was one of the first women who opened it up when most people don't even know it was a men's prison prior. So I want to give Kat, I know we're close on time before we go into Q&A, but I do want to give Kat that 5 to 6 minutes to introduce herself and then just kind of go into, a little bit of Perrywill. This is one of several different series and cafes. And, we will have Kat back, So Kat, with that being said, are you there? You good?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay.
Ever seen Kat? She's sleeping.
Okay, I know this is literally the 40th anniversary of Perrywill. It started 40 years ago with a sit-in at the then hotel that was being used for the women's prison. I started that sit-in. I rousted everybody, got them all out, all up in arms about sitting in what was considered maximum security at the time, doing nothing. No access to programs on the yard, nothing. So, the inmates at that time didn't even know why some of them were sitting in the yard other than they were just tired. Perrywill was opened in March of '81 because they originally built Perrywill with funding so that it could be a women's prison. That's how they got the funding to build it. They never intended to open it for the women. I know most of you are not old enough to that it was a fire, that they couldn't even lock the doors because the fire marshals told them they couldn't lock the doors. And I was doing a 15-year sentence, and I had an escape history, and they did not have a clue what to do with me because I escaped from California's prison. But in some ways, opening Perrywill at the time I was there gave us an opportunity to build some programs. We had the maintenance program, we had college classes. I got somebody trying to call in. anyways, the staff didn't know what they were doing. The inmates didn't know what they were doing, but it gave us an opportunity to build a maintenance department. It gave us a chance to build some programs because it was all brand new. And from what I understand now, all of those things are gone. All of those types of programs that we had back then, college classes, GED classes, music room. I don't know if the electronics line is still there, the engraving shop, print shop, all those things are gone now. They have slowly regressed at Perrywill in such a way that it kind of sickens me, because I know what is possible within those walls. I mean, even with my history of an escape, I was still able to go out and work at Copper State Plastics and work at the DPS tire shop. And I don't think that they allow that anymore out of Perrywill. So I've been out for going on 30 years now, 29 years actually. So my perspectives might be a little bit different on things that like make me feel, you know, things I do every day that make me feel like a whole person, because no matter what, I did 15 years. I did 2.5 years in isolation, literally in isolation. In California, I was in the Deep Six unit that they built for the Manson women. And every day since I've gotten out, I have fought to get a job, fought to keep pushing from where I was to begin with. I was an electrician. I was an apprentice before I went in. I finished my journeymanship. I am a retired journeyman electrician now. I work in a political organization. Politics have become a driving force for me to see how, you know, to see things change. I work for an organization that helps put progressive candidates into office. And a lot of people don't understand that getting those politicians into office is what helps drive the change. And so I have not stopped fighting in all this time. And it's always in the back of my mind. You know, despite the fact that I've been out nearly 30 years, things will happen and I will get that little attitude, and you guys know what I'm talking about, where I slip into that convict attitude of, all right, fine, we're gonna do it. We'll do it this way. Even now, you know, I'm way past being there, but it's still there in the back of my mind. There are still people that I remember from there. Some of you know Jerry Nosey, some of you know Judy Henderson, some of you know Betty Smithy. Those are old timers that I did time with too, back in the day, that did 26, 34, 52 years. And it just never quite goes away. You still remember the people you leave behind. You hope you can do things that will help make changes from the outside. Some people don't. Some people get out and they just want it to go away without realizing that it never really does. The harder you try to deny that part, the harder you try to pretend it didn't happen, to move on. Sometimes the harder it is.
Okay, Kat, we're gonna get to the Q&A. I appreciate you sharing, and please stick around for the Q&A. And for anybody who has to jump at 8, we can officially end at 8, but you know, I'm honored to have Kat here. So Anybody that officially, that has to jump at 8, that's cool. But I want to go ahead and open it up for Q&A. Marie, are you there?
Yes, Khalil, I'm here.
Okay, first question.
Our first question comes from Irene Rushdan, and her question is, she says, in my current work, most of the people who have experienced incarceration express counseling helps them. Do you feel this should be a priority among other things needed?
And anybody can take it in about a minute or two. Anybody can take it, please.
So you're saying counseling where? On the inside or both?
I'm not sure if she was, she didn't specify whether outside or inside. So if we could touch a little bit on both.
Okay. Yes, counseling on the inside is critical. You don't get that in there. You need somebody outside of your peers to talk to. Yes. And then on the outside, some people do, some people don't. I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but it helps. And I'm I have some stuff and it helps. So yes.
Honestly, I don't think anybody can do it alone.
Yep.
You have got to find somebody to talk to, whether it's a professional counselor, whether it's somebody close to you, whether it's a friend or family member. Nobody is going to be able to do this alone. It just doesn't happen. I would like to believe that I could do it alone, but even I know better.
I'll touch briefly on it also as well. So trauma and addiction are really complex issues. So it's not something where you can just wake up one day and say, you know what, as much as I wish it were the case, you can't just say, all of those things that I went through, I'm just not going to let them affect me anymore, because they do. They affect you on a deep level. So even if you're ignoring it on a surface level, those things will come creeping back up. And for me, it took really intense and really uncomfortable trauma therapy to go through some of the layers of what I went through. So I think that, like Veto said, I think it's critical. I think that it's one of the key pieces that's missing, and not counseling from, the mental health services that currently exist, where you go in and they're like, hey, here's some pieces of paper that you can color on, some deep, intense counseling, and then having that ability to continue it when you get out, if you should so decide. I think that would be a complete game changer.
Thank you. So this one is for Alex, coming from Alan. How did the DOC navigate COVID? Can we talk about COVID? And what are you hearing from some of the women who are inside right now? I mean, and Kim, you can also chime in on this. This is for all speakers today.
So in reality, there really wasn't any navigating. I'm going to be completely honest. When it first became a thing, the officers were telling us that it was a lie, that it was fake, that it was a sham, that if COVID was going to get in the prisons, it was going to come from us, like as if we could just create it out of nothing, So there really was none. And then things started to get a little bit more, it was in the media. It got big in the media. So then they kind of changed to where they said, okay, we're going to stop letting jobs go out, but we'll let the ones who are still in the prison work, because the public won't know about it. So I was still working, in contact with civilians and everything on the daily. They started making the officers wear masks, but it wasn't enforced. It was more of like a, hey, if you want to wear a mask, do it. They had told us that we were allowed to gently ask them to wear their masks, but people started getting ticketed for disorderly conduct for it. So we stopped asking. Eventually they provided us with masks made of, we couldn't tell if it was sheet or boxer material, but one of the two, seriously ineffective materials. And, when people would get sick, they would beg for tests and not get them. My closest friend got it, and she had to fake another health issue just to get to medical to get them to give her a test. And then once she tested positive, they refused to test the rest of the yard. So who knows how inaccurate their numbers are on their COVID testing. But really, that's really the answer. There really was no navigating it. It was just kind of going with the flow and just saying, well, it is what it is. And from what I'm hearing now, Perrywill has a large outbreak right now. So it kind of finally hit that tipping point that we all knew was coming. And there are a ton of women in quarantine right now. So yards are locked down. And even on the yards where there's, 60 positive COVID tests, they're still allowing some of those women to go out to work. So it's really just an ineffective method of stopping COVID. And we have a lot of vulnerable people in the prisons at this moment, and a lot of people are at risk. So to continue allowing them, they're going out to work and then going around other civilians and mixing, and it's just, it's really sad because so many people have died. And I just hope that we can get the vaccine rolled out, and I hope that women get, this is a shot in the dark. I'm sure it'll never happen, but educate them, because a lot of them are scared of medical. So I fear that even when the vaccine becomes available to them, they're not going to take it because they don't trust medical. So it's just this ongoing problem. So sorry if I rambled a little bit, but it's really been a mess in all reality.
Yeah, and Khalil, I was on a task force with other religious leaders from Arizona who met regularly with Director Shin, with DHS and Dr. Christ, and also with the governor's office about the measures that were not being taken within our prisons. I received a lot of information from the ladies because I communicate with them more regularly, but also from the men. And everything that Alex was sharing about the masks is absolutely what I heard from every facility that across the board. We begged over and over and over again for testing of officers, staff, and contractors that come into the prison, because that's where the COVID was piggybacking and coming in. And just February 18th at our last meeting, we were told they could not mandate testing for those people because it would violate their rights. And yet they require testing for tuberculosis. Let's see, is it tuberculosis? Yeah, they require that of everybody, including volunteers. So that was just an out and out falsehood. So they can require testing, and they're just refusing to do it. And it's free. So I don't know why there's such an issue with that. But yes, the numbers on the dashboard are incorrect. The recent numbers are really blatantly misrepresented. And we figured that if you would increase them by at least 40%, you'd be closer to what has occurred. I've heard from women who actually had COVID and went through the early quarantine, which was basically locking you in a building and checking your temperature when you went in, and then leaving you there for 10 to 14 days, and then checking your temperature when you came out. Nothing was done the entire 14 days you were in there. You were in there without access to anything and ignored. And the officers didn't want to have anything to do with you. Pill call maybe happened, maybe didn't happen. Those who were fainting and having problems with nausea and the headaches that occur with COVID were just ignored. Nothing was provided as far as healthcare for those that were in there. So once the stories got back out onto the yard from those who had been quarantined, and everyone heard, well, this is what happens if you think you're getting treatment, you're not, then nobody wanted to get tested and find out that they had it and go into quarantine anymore. So that did not help control COVID on the yard at all because of the way that they responded to the situation. And I have other inmates that have written to me that are obviously what they call COVID long haulers. These are people that have experienced long lasting effects from having COVID early in the process. And they're being called hypochondriacs and laughed at and turned away at medical, even though they are continuing to struggle with numerous issues related to having had COVID. But since they weren't allowed to be tested and confirmed that they had it, because early on in the process, they just weren't testing. They would not give somebody a test. So they have no leg to stand on as far as, well, these are COVID-related symptoms that they're struggling with. So it's just been a fiasco in the way that ADC has handled it. And the dashboard, once it started showing results that were not in the ADC's best interests, they stopped reporting numbers. Just last month's numbers, I mean, you know, there was an increase of like 300 cases across all of the prisons in Arizona. And I've been averaging this, I've been checking it every month. I've been averaging around 3,500 to 4,000 a month. And last month we had 300. Are you kidding me? So we know that there's something that's really wrong in the way that they're handling this. And it's very disappointing.
And just a plug, while we're on this COVID, this Sunday, the 21st, Puente Human Rights Movement will be having a vigil out at Perrywill because, like I said, just the inhumane conditions, everything going on around with COVID, you know, and then with the vaccine and the narrative around recovery, we know for a fact, you know, it's not even a point of whether people recover. We're looking at the suffering, the unnecessary suffering that goes on, you know, because of the lack of a pandemic plan. So also, we don't want the vaccine to control the narrative because, you know, there is no distribution plan, or they say it is, but, you know, as of Friday, we were in Tucson and, you know, no one, well, there was few people we heard got vaccinated, but there's no way to verify that. And I will share a link from a story that a reporter in Tucson, you know, covering the infection rate and the vaccination rate. He found it to be alarming because most of the infections were in the prison. However, those being vaccinated were not in the prison. So, you know, this Sunday, Perrywill, please come out, please share. We're going to have a social distance vigil to highlight those women and let them know there are people still out here fighting for them. So that will be at Perrywill. We'll be out there at 5:45, and the vigil will start at 6. And I will share that information with anybody who wants to go. So I just wanted to plug that real quick. Next question, Marie.
Okay. Our next question comes from Sandy Ware. She states, on the outside, adults make decisions. In prison, if you have no options for daily schedule or when to be alone or with others, and no options to go for a walk in nature, etc., what does that do to you?
You want your pickle back? You can eat it. We will get me one.
Whoever wants to take it first.
That's a tough one. I think that just becomes such a normal part of life. So it affects you in ways when you're in because you never have, you know, for me, I had to create my own space. And for me, that was art. So people learned if I'm in my area and my headphones are in and my paintbrushes are out, don't leave me alone. You know what I mean? I had to create an environment for myself that was like that, because there was no getting it. You know, I mean, there was really nothing I could do about the strict schedule or anything like that, but I learned to create little pieces of the day that were my own. You know, and in there, that's helpful. But then you come out to the real world, and the way that I learned to cope like that didn't really mesh well with out here, you know? So it's like flip-flopping between, you know, all these different ways of life. I don't know if that answered the question, but it really was just creating those moments for myself where I could be alone, you know, in a dorm filled with 350 people. But when my music was on, it was like I could disassociate from where I was at. But in the end, you know, learning how to disassociate so well ended up causing problems later on when I got out. So it's a tough line to toe.
I could say too also that like I went to the hole a couple of times, and like you're locked in 23 hours a day. You got we get out, like if you're in the hole and you get out 3 times a week for 1 hour. And sometimes you had a roommate, sometimes you didn't. There was a moment where I didn't. When I finally got, I can tell you that when I being in there, you will figure out things to do. We are people. We are dynamic. We are vibrant. We are capable. We can do anything, right? And so, like, it's up to that person too. In there, the whole is not normal though. That's not the way humans are supposed to exist. And so that to the point that when I got out of the hole, I was very, very paranoid. If anybody was behind me, it was too much. If there was loud, it was too much. And I didn't know how to talk to people anymore. So I just stayed very quiet. Like I just, it took a second for me to learn how to be social again. I also learned how to just totally disconnect. Like I totally quit asking for help. I totally quit depending on people. I chose to not want anything at all, so that I didn't, because that seemed like I had to, because I couldn't have anything. And so of course, the little things that that I did have, my poetry, my music, my books, those were everything to me, but I did my best not to let anybody know, or like, because that was the only thing I could have. And then there comes a point where I just let go of everything. I'd give stuff away, blah, 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 whatever. So now getting out the hole, going through all of what I'm going through, can't communicate, I just not connected whatsoever. And then I get out of prison, and now I'm out here. I have all these options. I don't know what I want. I don't know what I like. You know, I don't know anything. What do you want? I don't know. And I don't even know how to feel excited about wanting certain things. I don't know how to feel about certain things. When I communicate with people, you know, like I always feel like I'm being judged, and it's crazy because, you know, it's not like it's a cycle. It's being judged all your life. Like there's a constant criticism of everything that you've ever done in life, that it's really hard to feel confident about anything that you do, no matter what people tell you of how good it is. Like there's something it's hard to believe in yourself. It's hard to believe in people. It's hard, like, and this is real. And this all, like, I know it happened. I knew something happened to me when I got out the hole, because I wasn't the same person. I was not.
Alex or Kat, would you like to address that question?
I can kind of relate to being in the hole. It was a little different for me because I looked forward to it. That was my peace and quiet. That was my opportunity to get away from everything that was going on. That was my time to be by myself and deal with my own thoughts. And it happened so often for me. I was sentenced and I did every day of it. Okay, I lost every day of good time. I spent, I don't know how many 30 days spent in the hole in that 15 years. The 2.5 years I did in California in segregation was completely different than Perrywill because it was literally 24/7 in your cell. You did not come out. You had 1 hour out a week to shower, to exercise. It was a completely different thing. You had no property. You had a paper dress they gave you, and I lived like that for 2 years. But I also did things that made them wildly crazy. Like, you know, I'm into art as well. So I would take, because they couldn't take away the pencil, they couldn't take away the walls. So I drew on my walls. And in 2.5 years, they moved me 4 times to 4 different cells because I decorated. So you find ways, you know, to cope and compensate. But getting out, I went through the same thing of you know, stay away from me, back off, don't get too close to me. I didn't want anybody in my space. And I don't know if part of that is because of paranoia so much as it was because I knew I was going to end up back in the hole again. I don't want any close relationships because those people may not be there when I get out anyway, when I get out of the hole the next time. So building really close relationships becomes a difficulty. You don't want people that close to you. And that was hard too, because I had a partner that was there with me that did 8 years of that time with me. And the hardest thing I have ever had to do was to tell her to go home while I was still there. So it is a trauma to be alone by yourself sometimes. But when you get out, that trauma stays with you. And it shapes who you are and what you do and how you deal with other people. And again, that goes back to the counseling. I think everybody needs somebody. Everybody's got to have somebody to talk to.
I just wanted to add one more thing if I can too. So like the worst case scenario happened to a woman, her last name, I can't remember. She was like 23 years old. And she hung herself when she was in the hole. When they walked into her room, her whole entire room had scripture written all over it. She was pleading for help. She had mental issues. And being in a world where you don't know what your options are, we don't know what was going, so that's the worst case scenario right there, is this little girl. And there's many people who have committed suicide while being in the hole. It's not good. It's not good.
Okay, I want to, we're going to have to shift the essence of time. We are over. However, I want to go ahead and remind people of our next event. To those people on Facebook watching, you know, we appreciate the questions. We will answer them. You know, we will forward them to the panelists and make sure those panelists have an opportunity to answer those questions. no question will go on unanswered. Thank you. So remember, this week, the ACLU Smart Justice in Our Shoes event, March 18th from 6 to 8 p.m. You can go and you can see that on smartjusticeaz.org. Also, we have the event coming up Sunday, which is the Puente Human Rights Comply and Release Vigil for those women who are in Perrywill. That will start at 5:45 out at Perrywill, or excuse me, we'll be there at 5:45. It'll start at 6 p.m. So please, family members, everybody, let's get out there. Safe, social distance vigil. Also, next Tuesday, the 23rd, we are starting our new racial justice series. And the discussion will be around redlining in Arizona. Clottie Hammonds, who was here today, who had to jump, I call her a walking history book when it comes to Arizona or in Phoenix. I look forward to hearing from her and Pastor Stewart and some other special guests. So that will be next Tuesday here. That event is going to start, Katie, if I get this wrong, poke holes in me, at 6:30. Correct. Okay. So with that being said, I want to turn this over to Ellie, and I want Ellie to lead us in a moment of silence.
I was like, wait, that wasn't on the schedule. Yeah. Well, I'm glad I wasn't outside walking my dog. Hey, I really want to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for joining us. If anything, COVID has taught us that our time is precious. COVID has taught us that all things can be torn apart and built anew. And that despite everything, against our belief systems and what we've been conditioned to think, that tú eres mi otro, you are the other me. And so if I can just get you all gathered to where you are, knowing that our faith practices are different, recognizing the way that we connect to our own humanity and the humanities of others are different. But what we do share is breath. And so I encourage us to inhale deeply through the nose at whatever count you're comfortable with, holding it for just a brief moment, and then exhaling the love and the energy and the breath of life to everything that surrounds us at this moment. So in through the nose. And hold. And breathe life back into the world, friends. Thank you so much for your time. Please check out chat. I know there were 2 questions that we didn't get around to. We'll be sure to answer them. Check out arizonafaithnetwork.org in order to find out some of these new things that we have coming up and the ways in which to be engaged. And please, with all of your energy, I encourage you to unmute yourselves and shout out just gratitude for all of the stories that we heard tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for your
Bye,
interest.
everybody.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Vero.
Thank you.
And can I ask panelists, everybody